The early morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Atlanta International Airport as Amara Johnson checked her watch. She had arrived with plenty of time to spare for her 9:30 flight to San Francisco. Today was important. She'd be meeting with potential investors who could help take her company to the next level. Amara adjusted the strap of her leather laptop bag and rolled her small carry-on suitcase toward the check-in counter. She'd packed light, as she always did for business trips, just the essentials for 3 days of meetings. "Good morning," she said to the airline agent, sliding her ID and Platinum Rewards card across the counter. The agent barely looked up. "Economy or first class today?" "First class," Amara replied. The agent's eyes flickered up, giving Amara a quick once-over, taking in her casual jeans, white sneakers, and simple navy blouse, before returning to the computer screen with a slight frown. After printing her boarding pass, Amara headed to security. As the founder and CEO of NextGen Solutions, a tech company now valued at over $1 billion, she could have dressed in designer clothes and flashy jewelry. But that wasn't her style. She built her company from nothing based on brains and hard work, not appearances. 2 hours later, after answering emails in the business lounge, Amara headed to her gate. The flight to San Francisco was beginning to board. She joined the line for first-class passengers, boarding pass in hand. "Excuse me," called a sharp voice. "That line is for first class only." Amara turned to face a gate agent, a woman with pinched lips and a tight ponytail. "Yes, I know," Amara said with a smile. "I have a first-class ticket." She held up her boarding pass. The gate agent's eyes narrowed. "Let me see that." She snatched the boarding pass from Amara's hand and studied it with unusual intensity. Meanwhile, other first-class passengers, mostly older white men in business suits, filed past them without being stopped. "Is there a problem?" Amara asked, keeping her voice level despite the knot forming in her stomach. She knew this feeling all too well. "Just making sure everything's in order," the agent replied, still examining the pass. "How did you get a first-class ticket?" The question hung in the air. Around them, the busy gate area seemed to grow quiet, though Amara knew it was just her focus narrowing. "I booked it," Amara answered simply, "just like everyone else." The agent's mouth tightened. "Well, these tickets are very expensive." "I'm aware of the cost," Amara said, reaching for her pass. "May I board now?" "The line is moving." The agent reluctantly handed back the boarding pass. "Fine. But next time, you might want to get in the right line from the start. Saves everyone trouble." Amara took a deep breath and walked toward the jet bridge. This wasn't her first time dealing with this kind of treatment, and she doubted it would be her last. As she settled into her spacious first-class seat, she couldn't help noticing how the flight attendant warmly greeted the businessman next to her while barely acknowledging her presence. She pulled out her phone and made a quick note, the date, time, flight number, and a brief description of what had happened. It was the 4th incident with this same airline in less than a year. The previous complaints she'd filed had disappeared into the void of customer service, each one answered with the same empty apology email. As the plane began to taxi, Amara stared out the window at the runway lights. She thought about the meeting awaiting her in San Francisco, about the 800 people who worked for her company, about the millions of dollars NextGen spent on corporate travel each year. Maybe it was time to stop filing complaints that nobody read. Maybe it was time to use the power she'd worked so hard to build. She opened her laptop as soon as the seatbelt sign turned off. Before working on her presentation, she wrote a quick email to her chief financial officer. "When we get back, I need to see our complete travel expenditure data, especially how much we're spending with Transglobal Airlines. It's important." This time would be different. This time she wouldn't be ignored. Long before Amara Johnson became the powerhouse CEO who commanded respect in boardrooms across America, she was just a curious kid from Detroit with a knack for taking things apart and putting them back together. Her parents' modest 2-bedroom home often turned into a workshop of dismantled radios, old computers, and homemade gadgets. "You're going to break it," her father would warn whenever she started unscrewing the back of a new device. "I'm going to understand it," little Amara would correct him, her small fingers already working methodically on the screws. Her mother, a high school math teacher, recognized Amara's talent early. Instead of fancy toys, she brought home broken electronics from garage sales and thrift stores, giving Amara endless puzzles to solve. By 13, Amara had built her first computer from salvaged parts. High school proved challenging in different ways. While Amara excelled academically, she often found herself the only black girl in advanced science and computer classes. When the robotics team coach initially overlooked her application, assuming she'd made a mistake in signing up, her mother marched into the school. "My daughter doesn't make mistakes about her interests," she told him firmly. "And you're making a big one by not giving her a chance." Amara not only joined the team but led them to the state championships that year. When the MIT acceptance letter arrived, her parents cried. Neither had gone to college, but they'd worked double shifts and extra jobs to make sure Amara could chase opportunities they never had. The scholarship covered most costs, but Amara still worked part-time throughout college to help with expenses. At MIT, Amara thrived in the challenging environment despite sometimes feeling out of place among classmates who came from wealth and privilege. While others spent breaks traveling abroad, she interned at tech companies, building her resume and saving every penny. "It's not just about being smart," her favorite professor told her during a tough semester. "It's about outlasting the problems until you find solutions. That's where you shine, Johnson." After graduation, Amara climbed the corporate ladder at several major tech firms. She earned respect for her innovative thinking and tireless work ethic, but repeatedly watched as less qualified colleagues, usually men, received promotions she deserved. The breaking point came during a late-night conversation with her closest friend from college, now also working in tech. "I'm tired of building someone else's dream," Amara admitted, staring into her coffee cup. "I've got ideas they're too scared to try." "So build your own dream," her friend replied simply. 3 months later, Amara quit her six-figure job and launched NextGen Solutions from her tiny apartment. She lived on savings and ramen noodles, pouring everything into developing new cybersecurity software that could protect small businesses from increasingly sophisticated attacks. The first year was brutal. Potential investors questioned whether she had the experience to lead a company. One memorable meeting ended with a venture capitalist suggesting she find a technical co-founder despite her decade of technical expertise. Amara refused to give up. She secured a small business loan and won over her first major client by offering a money-back guarantee they couldn't refuse. That client led to more, and within 3 years, NextGen was turning a profit. 8 years later, the company Amara started on her apartment floor was now valued at $1.2 billion, with offices in 4 cities and over 800 employees. Last month's Forbes magazine had featured her on the cover, calling her the future of tech security. But sitting in that first-class seat, being deliberately ignored by the flight attendant who smiled warmly at every other passenger, Amara was reminded of an uncomfortable truth. Success didn't shield you from certain realities. It just gave you more resources to fight back when necessary. And Amara Johnson had always been a fighter. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Amara closed her laptop and gazed out the window. The incident at the gate had triggered memories of other uncomfortable moments with Transglobal Airlines over the past year. The first had happened last summer on a red-eye flight to New York. Amara had boarded early, settled into her first-class seat, and watched as other passengers filed in. The flight attendant moved through the cabin, offering pre-flight drinks to everyone. Everyone except her. At first, Amara thought it was an oversight. The cabin was full. The attendant was busy. But when the woman returned with a second round of drinks and skipped her again, Amara pressed the call button. "Excuse me," she said when the attendant arrived with a tight smile. "I haven't been offered a drink." "Oh," the attendant replied, looking surprised despite having passed Amara twice. "What would you like?" "Water, please," Amara said. "And maybe an explanation of why I was skipped." Twice. The water arrived without the explanation. When Amara filed a complaint afterward, the response was a generic email. "We strive to provide excellent service to all our valued customers and regret any misunderstanding." Then there was the incident at the airline's executive lounge in Chicago 3 months later. Despite showing her platinum membership card, the same one the white businessman ahead of her had flashed before being waved through, Amara was asked for additional ID and her boarding pass. The lounge attendant scrutinized her documents under the bright desk lamp. "Is there a problem?" Amara had asked. "Just making sure," the attendant replied. "We've had people try to use stolen cards." The implication stung, but Amara maintained her composure as other executives walked past, nodding hello to her. Some knew her from industry events or her recent feature in Business Week. None was stopped for extra verification. Again, her complaint received only a form letter response. But the worst incident happened 2 months ago on a flight from Dallas. Amara had been seated in first class for about 10 minutes when a flight attendant approached. "Ma'am, would you mind moving to seat 4B? We need to accommodate another passenger in your seat." Amara looked around. First class was half empty. Why? The flight attendant lowered her voice. "We have a passenger who specifically requested your seat. He's a frequent flyer with special status." "I'm also a frequent flyer," Amara pointed out, "with your airline's highest status level." The attendant's smile tightened. "It would really help us out." When Amara refused to move without a better explanation, the gate agent was called. He spoke loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Ma'am, if you're going to be difficult, we can arrange for you to take a later flight." Only when Amara mentioned her company's legal team did they back down, offering mumbled apologies before hurrying away. The VIP passenger was eventually seated elsewhere, a middle-aged white man in a golf shirt who looked confused by the whole situation. That time, Amara had written a detailed letter to the airline's customer relations department requesting information about their seating policies and an explanation for the treatment she'd received. The response? Another form letter thanking her for her valuable feedback. The San Francisco skyline appeared through breaks in the clouds as the plane continued its descent. Amara thought about what these incidents had in common. They all involved situations where someone assumed she didn't belong in first class, in the executive lounge, in the seat she paid for. Her success hadn't made her immune to these assumptions. If anything, it had created more situations where people's biases could reveal themselves. The difference now was that she had resources, financial power, legal support, and business connections that many others facing similar treatment didn't have. As the plane touched down with a gentle bump, Amara made a decision. She was tired of individual complaints that went nowhere. It was time to address the pattern. She pulled out her phone as soon as the plane reached the gate, scrolling to find the number for Diane, her chief financial officer. "Diane," she said when the call connected, "I need you to pull some data for me. How much does NextGen spend with Transglobal Airlines annually? And I need our total corporate travel budget across all airlines. Yes, it's important. Very important." This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was about changing a system. The lobby of the Four Seasons San Francisco hummed with activity as Amara stepped through the revolving doors. Despite the 6-hour flight and the unpleasant boarding experience, she walked with purpose, nodding to the front desk staff as she crossed to the elevators. In her suite, Amara kicked off her shoes and ordered room service before making a series of calls. First to her assistant about tomorrow's investor meeting, then to her husband to let him know she'd arrived safely. Finally, she called Diane, her chief financial officer. "I need you and Thomas in my hotel suite tonight," she told Diane, referring to NextGen's chief legal officer. "Book the next flight out if you have to." "What's going on?" Diane asked, concern evident in her voice. "Did something happen with the investors?" "Not the investors," Amara replied. "It's about Transglobal Airlines. I'll explain when you get here." 5 hours later, Amara's hotel suite had transformed into an impromptu war room. Diane sat cross-legged on the sofa, her laptop balanced on her knees, while Thomas paced near the windows, the city lights creating a dramatic backdrop behind him. "So they stopped you from boarding first class, even though you had a first-class ticket?" Thomas asked, his legal mind already cataloging the details. "And this is the 4th incident with this airline?" Amara nodded. "I've documented everything. Dates, flight numbers, names when I could get them. I'd filed complaints after each incident, but they just sent form letters in response." Diane looked up from her screen. "I've pulled the numbers you asked for. NextGen spent $5.2 million with Transglobal last year alone." That's out of our total corporate travel budget of $15 million across all airlines. Thomas whistled softly. That's significant. But what exactly are you thinking, Amara? Amara stood and walked to the desk where she'd laid out all 4 complaint letters she'd sent to the airline, along with their generic responses. I'm thinking it's time to stop being just another complaint in their system, she said. I'm thinking it's time to speak a language they'll understand. She turned to face her colleagues. We're in the middle of negotiating next year's corporate travel contracts, right? Diane nodded. Yes, we're set to finalize within the next month. We've been talking to all the major carriers, including Transglobal. Good, Amara said. Then we have leverage. She outlined her plan as her team listened intently. This wasn't about revenge or public shaming. This was about using NextGen's economic power to create meaningful change. We won't go to social media or the press, she explained. That's not my style, and it rarely leads to genuine change. Instead, we'll approach this like any other business negotiation. Thomas nodded slowly. I like it. Instead of just another individual complaint, we're approaching this as a corporate client with serious concerns about how our employees are treated when they travel. Exactly, Amara said. And with over 800 employees, 40% of whom are people of color, this isn't just about me. It's about ensuring respectful treatment for our entire workforce. Diane clicked through several spreadsheets on her laptop. I've got the travel data here by airline and employee demographics. If you want to make your case with hot numbers, these will help. The 3 worked late into the night preparing their strategy. They compiled a comprehensive report showing NextGen's total airline expenditure, the diversity of their workforce, and documented incidents of discriminatory treatment. We should add some market analysis too, Thomas suggested around midnight. Show them exactly what they stand to lose if we take our business elsewhere. Amara pulled up a chair beside him. What are you thinking? Several competing airlines have been courting our business, he said. If we showed Transglobal that we have viable alternatives who are eager for our contract, it strengthens our position. By 2 a.m., they had a solid plan. Instead of another ignored complaint, they would approach the airline's executive team directly with a clear message. Address these systemic issues or lose one of your largest corporate clients. Get some sleep, Amara told her team as they gathered their materials. Tomorrow, we start making calls. After they left, Amara stood at the window, looking out at the twinkling lights of San Francisco. For most of her life, she'd fought battles alone. The only black girl in advanced science classes, the only woman in executive meetings, the constant need to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But now she had something more than just her own determination. She had built a successful company. She had financial leverage. She had a voice that could open doors previously closed to her. And she intended to use it. The lobby of the Four Seasons San Francisco hummed with activity as Amara stepped through the revolving doors. Despite the 6-hour flight and the unpleasant boarding experience, she walked with purpose, nodding to the front desk staff as she crossed to the elevators. In her suite, Amara kicked off her shoes and ordered room service before making a series of calls. First to her assistant about tomorrow's investor meeting, then to her husband to let him know she'd arrived safely. Finally, she called Diane, her chief financial officer. I need you and Thomas in my hotel suite tonight, she told Diane, referring to NextGen's chief legal officer. Book the next flight out if you have to. What's going on? Diane asked, concern evident in her voice. Did something happen with the investors? Not the investors, Amara replied. It's about Transglobal Airlines. I'll explain when you get here. 5 hours later, Amara's hotel suite had transformed into an impromptu war room. Diane sat cross-legged on the sofa, her laptop balanced on her knees, while Thomas paced near the windows, the city lights creating a dramatic backdrop behind him. So they stopped you from boarding first class, even though you had a first-class ticket? Thomas asked, his legal mind already cataloging the details. And this is the 4th incident with this airline? Amara nodded. I've documented everything. Dates, flight numbers, names when I could get them. I've filed complaints after each incident, but they just sent form letters in response. Diane looked up from her screen. I've pulled the numbers you asked for. NextGen spent $5.2 million with Transglobal last year alone. That's out of our total corporate travel budget of $15 million across all airlines. Thomas whistled softly. That's significant. But what exactly are you thinking, Amara? Amara stood and walked to the desk where she'd laid out all 4 complaint letters she'd sent to the airline, along with their generic responses. I'm thinking it's time to stop being just another complaint in their system, she said. I'm thinking it's time to speak a language they'll understand. She turned to face her colleagues. We're in the middle of negotiating next year's corporate travel contracts, right? Diane nodded. Yes, we're set to finalize within the next month. We've been talking to all the major carriers, including Transglobal. Good, Amara said. Then we have leverage. She outlined her plan as her team listened intently. This wasn't about revenge or public shaming. This was about using NextGen's economic power to create meaningful change. We won't go to social media or the press, she explained. That's not my style, and it rarely leads to genuine change. Instead, we'll approach this like any other business negotiation. Thomas nodded slowly. I like it. Instead of just another individual complaint, we're approaching this as a corporate client with serious concerns about how our employees are treated when they travel. Exactly, Amara said. And with over 800 employees, 40% of whom are people of color, this isn't just about me. It's about ensuring respectful treatment for our entire workforce. Diane clicked through several spreadsheets on her laptop. I've got the travel data here by airline and employee demographics. If you want to make your case with hard numbers, these will help. The 3 worked late into the night, preparing their strategy. They compiled a comprehensive report showing NextGen's total airline expenditure, the diversity of their workforce, and documented incidents of discriminatory treatment. We should add some market analysis too, Thomas suggested around midnight. Show them exactly what they stand to lose if we take our business elsewhere. Amara pulled up a chair beside him. What are you thinking? Several competing airlines have been courting our business, he said. If we show Transglobal that we have viable alternatives who are eager for our contract, it strengthens our position. By 2 a.m., they had a solid plan. Instead of another ignored complaint, they would approach the airline's executive team directly with a clear message. Address these systemic issues or lose one of your largest corporate clients. Get some sleep, Amara told her team as they gathered their materials. Tomorrow, we start making calls. After they left, Amara stood at the window, looking out at the twinkling lights of San Francisco. For most of her life, she'd fought battles alone. The only black girl in advanced science classes, the only woman in executive meetings, the constant need to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But now she had something more than just her own determination. She had built a successful company. She had financial leverage. She had a voice that could open doors previously closed to her, and she intended to use it. The morning sun streamed through the hotel suite's windows as Amara reviewed her notes one last time. She barely slept, but adrenaline kept her focused. After yesterday's investor meeting, which had gone exceptionally well, she was ready for today's real challenge. You sure you don't want me on this call? Thomas asked, straightening his tie as he stood nearby. As legal counsel, I called. I appreciate it, Amara cut in gently, but this first contact needs to be CEO to CEO. Just business leaders talking frankly, she smiled. Don't worry, I'll bring you in if I need the big legal guns. Diane handed Amara a fresh cup of coffee. Your contact at the Silicon Valley Business Roundtable came through. She sent over Richard Whitman's direct number. She was referring to Transglobal Airline CEO. Apparently, they play golf together. Perfect, Amara said, checking her watch. It was 8:55 a.m. in San Francisco, 11:55 a.m. at Transglobal's headquarters in Atlanta. He should be in his office. Let's do this. She picked up her phone and dialed, putting it on speaker so her team could listen. After 2 rings, a woman's voice answered, Mr. Whitman's office. Good morning. This is Amara Johnson, CEO of NextGen Solutions. I'd like to speak with Mr. Whitman, please. I'm sorry, Miss Johnson, but Mr. Whitman is very busy today. Perhaps I could schedule a call for next week, or I could transfer you to our corporate client services team. Amara's expression didn't change. She'd expected roadblocks. Please let Mr. Whitman know that Nexion spent $5.2 million with Transglobal last year, and I'm calling about our upcoming contract renewal. I'll hold. Less than 30 seconds later, a deep voice came on the line. Ms. Johnson, Richard Whitman here. What a pleasure. I've been following Nexion's impressive growth. Congratulations on the Forbes cover last month. Thank you, Mr. Whitman, Amara replied, her voice warm but professional. I appreciate you taking my call on short notice. Of course. How can I help you today? Amara took a sip of coffee before responding. I'm calling about an ongoing issue that affects our business relationship. Over the past year, I've personally experienced 4 separate incidents of discriminatory treatment on your airline. There was a slight pause. I'm very sorry to hear that, Ms. Johnson, Whitman said, his tone becoming more measured. Customer service is a top priority for us. I'm sure it is, Amara replied, which is why I'm perplexed that despite filing detailed complaints after each incident, I've received nothing but form letters in response. She briefly described each situation, the boarding incident, being skipped for drink service, the executive lounge scrutiny, and the attempted seat reassignment. These are certainly concerning, Whitman said when she finished. I assure you we'll look into these specific incidents immediately. We don't tolerate discrimination of any kind at Transglobal. I appreciate that, Amara said. But I'm not calling about just these 4 incidents, Mr. Whitman. I'm calling about what they represent, a pattern that suggests a deeper issue in your company culture. She could hear him shifting in his chair. Ms. Johnson, I think that's quite an extrapolation from a few isolated. They're not isolated, Amara interrupted firmly. And here's why this matters beyond my personal experience. Nexion employs over 800 people, 40% of whom are people of color. Many of them travel for business. I need to ensure they're treated with respect when representing our company. Thomas gave her a thumbs up from across the room. Of course, Whitman replied. Let me have our customer relations department reach out to you immediately to address these concerns. That won't be necessary, Amara said. I've already spoken with them multiple times. Now I'm speaking with you because this is a business decision. Nexion is currently reviewing all our corporate travel partnerships for the coming year. We have offers from several major carriers eager for our business. The line went silent for a moment before Whitman spoke again. I understand. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting to discuss how we might better serve Nexion's travel needs. I'd welcome that, Amara said. But before we meet, I'd like to see some concrete acknowledgement of the issue. Not another apology email promising to look into it, but real recognition that there's a problem worth addressing. What exactly are you suggesting? Whitman's voice had lost some of its casual confidence. I'm suggesting you personally review the complaints I'd filed, along with your company's responses. I'm suggesting you look at how your staff is trained to recognize and prevent bias. And I'm suggesting you consider whether your company culture truly reflects your stated values. Diane scribbled a note and slid it across the table. Let him know we're pausing bookings. Amara nodded. In the meantime, Mr. Whitman, we'll be temporarily suspending all new bookings with Transglobal while we evaluate our options. I've instructed our travel department accordingly this morning. That got his attention. Ms. Johnson, that seems rather drastic for a company experiencing repeated discriminatory treatment from a service provider. I don't think so. Her tone remained pleasant but firm. I'm simply making a business decision based on quality of service, which is something I'm sure you understand. After a brief silence, Whitman's tone changed. I do understand. And you have my word that I'll personally look into this matter. Could we schedule a follow-up call for tomorrow afternoon? Tomorrow afternoon works, Amara replied. I look forward to a productive conversation. As they exchanged goodbyes and ended the call, Thomas let out a low whistle. That was masterful, he said. You never raised your voice, never made accusations, just stated facts and outlined consequences. Diane was already typing on her laptop. I'm sending the travel department the directive to pause all Transglobal bookings, effective immediately. Amara set down her phone. Now we wait, but not for long. When $5 million in business is at stake, people tend to move quickly. And she was right. Before lunch, Whitman's assistant had sent over a detailed agenda for tomorrow's call, one that included the airline's head of diversity and inclusion, the VP of customer experience, and the corporate travel partnership director. The message was clear. They were taking this seriously now. Very seriously. The news spread quickly through Transglobal Airlines corporate headquarters. By mid-afternoon, Richard Whitman had called an emergency meeting with his executive team. The conference room buzzed with tension as department heads whispered among themselves, wondering what warranted such urgency. NextGen Solutions has suspended all bookings with us, Whitman announced without preamble once everyone was seated. That's $5.2 million in annual revenue at risk. The VP of Sales straightened in his chair. Because of one complaint, that seems excessive. Surely we can smooth this over with the usual VIP treatment package, upgrade vouchers, bonus miles, that sort of thing. Whitman shook his head. It's not one complaint. It's 4 documented incidents involving their CEO personally, plus concerns about how their employees are treated when they travel with us. He tapped the folder in front of him. And Amara Johnson isn't seeking special treatment. She's questioning our entire approach to diversity and inclusion. Is this really a company-wide issue? Asked the Chief Revenue Officer, frowning. Or just a few isolated incidents being blown out of proportion? The room fell silent when Patricia Henderson, head of customer experience, cleared her throat. As one of the few black executives at the company, she rarely spoke up in these meetings unless directly addressed. With respect, she said carefully, we've been seeing an increase in similar complaints for the past 18 months. I've tried raising the issue in my quarterly reports. She pulled out a tablet and slid it toward Whitman. If you check the data, complaints about discriminatory treatment have risen 32% since last year, while our response protocol hasn't changed. The Chief Financial Officer leaned forward. What exactly does this mean for us financially? Beyond NextGen. Whitman's assistant, who had been quietly taking notes, raised her hand. Sir, the media relations team is forwarding an inquiry from the Wall Street Journal. Someone leaked that we lost NextGen's business over discrimination complaints. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. How did this leak so quickly? Whitman demanded. It's not just the Journal, the assistant continued, checking her phone. NextGen's travel department notified their partner companies about the decision to suspend bookings with us. Several other corporate clients have called asking questions. The chief marketing officer cursed under his breath. This could snowball. Fast. By the next morning, it had. Transglobal's stock had dropped 4% at market open as financial analysts speculated about potential corporate client losses. The company's social media accounts were flooded with comments from people sharing their own negative experiences. Inside Transglobal's headquarters, a different crisis was unfolding. An anonymous employee had leaked internal emails to a popular business blog. Emails showing that previous complaints, similar to Amara's, had been deliberately downplayed and buried in customer service protocols designed to minimize liability rather than address issues. By noon, 3 more major corporate clients had called to express concerns about their travel contracts. 2 had followed NextGen's lead and temporarily suspended bookings pending review. Whitman paced his office, phone pressed to his ear as the company's biggest investors demanded explanations. Yes, I understand your concerns, he said for what felt like the 100th time that day. We're taking this extremely seriously. When he finally hung up, his assistant appeared at the door. Sir, the legal team needs to see you immediately. And HR has finished the preliminary review you requested of our training programs. What did they find? Whitman asked, though he already suspected the answer. The last significant update to our diversity training was 7 years ago, she said, and it was only mandatory for new hires, not existing staff. Whitman sank into his chair. What had started as one CEO's complaint was rapidly exposing systemic problems throughout his company, problems he'd ignored or been shielded from for years. His phone rang again. It was the board chairman, Richard. The chairman said without greeting, "The board is convening an emergency session at 4 p.m. We expect you to present a comprehensive plan to address this situation. The damage to our reputation is already substantial." "I'm working on it," Whitman promised, though in truth, he had no idea where to begin. After hanging up, he stared at the stack of reports on his desk. Buried among them was the folder containing Amara Johnson's complaints he'd initially dismissed as an overreaction. Now, with his company in crisis, his stock falling, and his board demanding answers, Richard Whitman finally began to understand the true cost of ignoring these issues for so long. The call with Amara was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. He had until then to come up with a genuine solution, not just to save the NextGen contract, but possibly to save his company's reputation and his own job. And for the first time in his career, Richard Whitman wasn't sure he was up to the challenge. 2 years later, Amara stood at the podium in Transglobal Airlines' newly renovated training center, looking out at the faces of 200 airline employees gathered for the graduation ceremony. Behind her, a large banner read, "Building Excellence Through Inclusion, Year 2. When I first approached your company about the treatment I received," she began, her voice carrying through the room, "I wasn't looking for special treatment. I wasn't even looking for an apology, though one was certainly warranted," she smiled. "What I was looking for was acknowledgement of a deeper problem and commitment to real change." The journey to this moment had been far from smooth. That follow-up call with Richard Whitman 2 years ago had started tensely, with Transglobal's team presenting what they clearly thought would be a quick fix: a personal apology, lifetime elite status for Amara, and a small donation to a diversity nonprofit. Amara had politely declined. "I'm not interested in token gestures," she had told them. "I'm interested in systemic change." What followed was a 3-hour negotiation that transformed into something unexpected, a genuine conversation about corporate responsibility and the real cost of discrimination. "For every person like me who has the platform to speak up," Amara had explained, "there are thousands who don't. People who swallow their hurt and frustration because they don't have the power to demand better. That's not just morally wrong, it's bad business." Instead of simply returning NextGen's business to Transglobal, Amara had proposed a partnership, one that would use NextGen's influence and Transglobal's reach to create meaningful change in the industry. The terms were straightforward but ambitious. First, mandatory diversity training for all Transglobal employees, not just new hires or customer-facing staff. And not just a 1-hour video, Amara had insisted, real education that changes perspectives. Second, a transparent system for handling discrimination complaints, with regular public reporting of data and actions taken. Third, an external review board of diversity experts to evaluate progress and hold the company accountable. And finally, a scholarship fund for underrepresented minorities interested in aviation careers, creating a pipeline of diverse talent for the future. In return, NextGen would not only resume their business with Transglobal, but sign an exclusive 3-year contract worth over $20 million. Now, 2 years later, Amara watched as the first class of Transglobal employees completed the comprehensive training program that had grown from that proposal. The results were already showing. Customer satisfaction scores were up across all demographic groups, employee retention had improved, and discrimination complaints had fallen by 67%. But the numbers, impressive as they were, didn't tell the whole story. The real change, Amara continued, gesturing to the graduates, is happening in moments most people never see. It's the gate agent who notices her own assumptions and corrects them before they become actions. It's the flight attendant who speaks up when a colleague treats someone unfairly. It's the slow, often invisible work of building a culture where everyone truly belongs. From the front row, Richard Whitman nodded. The Transglobal CEO had surprised everyone, most of all himself, by becoming a genuine champion for change. The crisis had forced him to confront blind spots he hadn't known he had. "What started as one company holding another accountable has become something bigger," Amara said, winding down her speech. 5 other major airlines have now adopted similar programs. Industry standards are shifting because one company was brave enough to admit it could do better. She paused, looking around the room. "I didn't want to shut down an airline. I wanted to change it. And together, that's exactly what we've done." The applause was thunderous as Amara stepped away from the podium. As she took her seat, a young black flight attendant approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said softly. "I've been with Transglobal for 6 years, and for the first time, I feel like I truly belong here." Amara squeezed her hand. "That's why we did this. Later, as Amara headed to the airport for her flight home, she reflected on the journey. The incident that had sparked it all had been painful, but the outcome had surpassed anything she could have imagined. NextGen had used its economic power not just to demand better treatment for its own people, but to create space for lasting change that benefited everyone. And as Amara settled into her first-class seat, greeted by name and with genuine warmth by the cabin crew, she felt a sense of satisfaction deeper than any business deal had ever given her. The fight for dignity and respect was far from over. But today, in this small corner of the world, progress was real and measurable. Sometimes change just needed someone brave enough to demand it, and powerful enough to make it impossible to ignore. The plane took off, climbing into clear blue skies, and Amara Johnson smiled. This was never just about a seat on a plane. It was about creating a world where everyone could move through life with the dignity they deserved. And that work, while not finished, had taken a significant step forward.